So, dear colleagues, dear friends, I'm Roman Nitsovich, and I'm Research Director of the Analytical Center Dixie Group, and I'm happy to welcome all of you at a regular event organized by the Consortium of Ukrainian Civil Society Organizations, RRR for You, which includes four organizations: the Center for Economic Strategies, the Institute of Economic Research and Political Consultations, the Institute of Analytics and Advocacy, as well as Dixie Group. And every month, our consortium conducts the monitoring of how Ukraine is meeting the requirements of the key stages, key phases of the support programs, in particular the program of the International Monetary Fund and the EU assistance within the Ukraine facility instrument. Every time we mention that this is not just about the commitments that have to be met, but it's about important reforms Ukraine needs badly for the sake of its economic, social, and other resilience dimensions, which are critically important in this historic time, the time of war, for our independence and our sovereignty. All our previous editions can be found on the website of the consortium. The colleagues will share the link with you and help. And traditionally, in the first part of the event, we will present the results of the current monitoring for August 2025. And the second part will be dedicated to a special topic. And this time, our special topic is going to be the issue of prices and tariffs in energy, utility prices and tariffs, which is a topic that is a concerning one for everyone because each of us is a consumer, and for a long period of time, challenges and problems have been accumulating in that field, and both the IMF and the EU and many other of our allies and partners are trying to draw our attention to this. So we will start our first part, and let me announce before that a couple of technical things. I can see new participants are joining us, so I think it's worth reminding you of all those technical issues. So we have simultaneous interpretation from Ukrainian into English and from English into Ukrainian. You can choose the channel in which you would like to listen to our session. Just press globe down on the Zoom panel and change the channel. So we are recording this event, and all the materials together with the recording will be sent out to all the participants who have got registered and who have provided us with their contact data. If you haven't done this, then please feel free to go to the website of the consortium, and those materials will also be there, and they will be published on the websites of the participating organizations, the members of the consortium. Since we have a webinar format, therefore, your questions for our highly distinguished speakers and panelists that will come in the second part. I mean, in the first one, these will be the panelists and then the speakers. So you may use the functionality of Zoom. You can see the Q&A sign, and there you can place your questions, which can be put down there both on the go and at the end of each presentation, and we will try to focus on all those issues within the allocated time. It's also very important for us to express our gratitude to the International Renaissance Foundation for supporting our work and for supporting our monitoring and this event as well. So that is all for the technical issues to be covered by me, and then let me go over to the first part, which is a traditional monthly review. And I would like to start with the general picture. A month ago, we we're talking about a sudden crisis, about a slowdown in the process, but a lot of things have happened over this period of time. Suppose the government has changed and new faces are there in the government, some old faces are still there, and a lot of new initiatives have been made public. That's why I would ask Maxim Samoyluk, the economist of the Center for Economic Strategy, about the following. So, Maxim, if we are watching the current situation, what conclusions can be drawn? What are the modern trends that we can track? Are we on the positive side, or are we just trying to read that positive side of these things? Well, thank you, Roman. Welcome, dear uh, participants of today's event. This month has really been rather interesting and active from the point of both our monitoring and from the point of view of performance of Ukraine's international commitments, because um, at our last event, as you remember, we mentioned that Ukraine has probably taken the wrong track, in particular as far as draft law about depriving the anti-corruption bodies of their independence. And this draft law launched a crisis in our relationship with the partners. But over the recent month, the trend has changed its track, and there was a playback in that respect, and the government became more responsible about our commitments that we have undertaken, and finally has appointed the head of the Bureau of Economic Security, which was one of the overdue and delayed commitments. And that came as an important signal for our partners, both from the point of view of international funding, which is extremely important for us in the conditions of full-scale war, and also from the point of view of the wider European integration trend, because it has shown that we are still moving ahead towards the EU, and we are for European values. We are for honesty, anti-corruption, and we are in favor of taking and meeting the commitments. Then we need to discuss how we should avoid this precedent, for it to become just a vaccine against any similar steps, because it's in all of our joint interests, and we cannot be talking about any differentiation between the authorities, the European partners, the civil society. This is all for the benefits of Ukraine, and that's why we need to be moving on in this direction. Let me also tell you a couple of words about what my colleagues will cover in detail. So I will speak a little bit on the on the cooperation within the with the IMF and the Ukraine facility. So as far as the IMF is concerned, the negotiations are going on, but we don't have any official details. And the point is that the problem of this current agreement is that it expects a quick ending of the war and quick beginning of recovery. That's why all the funding was kind of linked to this assumption that the war will end quickly. But since the war has been going on for 4 years already almost, those assumptions are postponed, and the current cooperation program is not as effective as it could have been. We may expect that if there is any other program, the unfulfilled commitments of Ukraine will be transferred to that new program and taken into account what happened with draft law 12414. The IMF may be more demanding as regards the Ukrainian authorities, because they have been very loyal, for which we are very grateful to them. The government has also updated the Ukraine facility plan. My colleagues will cover this issue in detail, but this is not yet an approved version, I mean, by the Council of the European Union. The changes have been coordinated with the European Commission, but they need to be improved. These changes within the Ukraine facility plan, since it is quite a long program and the circumstances may change, so it presupposes the possibility of changing the reforms and the conditions that we are to fulfill. Some of the reforms will be implemented before the deadline, but some of them will have to be postponed to further periods. But anyway, in this presentation, we are mainly using the data about the action plan that is valid as of August, which does not reflect the amendments coming. And after the approval comes within the IRR for you consortium, we will be monitoring it further. So thank you, and let me give the floor to our colleagues for a more detailed review. Thank you, Maxim. Thank you for keeping to the schedule, to the timeline. So let me remind all the participants that you have a chance to use the functionality of Zoom to ask questions in the Q&A section. Please, you may ask provocative, rhetorical questions or whatever questions you may have on the go during the presentations, and I will be trying to collect the questions and to ask those questions for the speakers to answer. So the IMF has been mentioned already, and the revision of the program has been mentioned, but there are also some discussions going on about the new program. At least it was mentioned last time. And it was said that it's not quite a bad idea because of the considerable changes in the circumstances under which the previous program was designed. So let me ask Vyacheslav Korillo, who is a policy and data analyst at the Institute for Analytics and Advocacy, what is the dynamics of Ukraine's relationship with the IMF, and what, because this relationship is rather symbolic for all the other international donors and partners of Ukraine, and what can we expect in the new IMF program review, and when it will possibly when will the new program of cooperation possibly come out? Thank you, Roman. I hope that you can see my screen. Yes, good. Thank you. So all in all, Maxim has actually spoken on the main focus of the government in the context of cooperation with the IMF. And it's true that there are a lot of discussions and there is a lot of insider information coming about the new prospective program with the IMF. At the previous monitoring session, we spoke quite a lot about why these discussions are generally going on and why we need this new program with the IMF. And you can get acquainted with the course of those discussions if you look through the previous monitoring session available on the website of the consortium. I will not speak on this in detail. But at the same time, we should not exclude a scenario which is also possible and under which we will have the ninth revision of the current program. Probably it will come in November or December 2025, and they will assess the performance of the structural beacons as of the end of September 2025. And as of that time, we are supposed to perform 9 structural beacons, and you can see on the slide what is the status of implementation. We have some problematic structural beacons, which I would like to briefly characterize to show you what the problems are. In particular, structural beacon 55 already has not been performed because the deadline came in July 2025. By the way, it was postponed twice, but nevertheless, the government failed to implement it. And according to the public information, this beacon will most probably be transferred to the new program with the fund. Also, there are some other structural beacons which are mentioned as the ones that are on the go in the process of implementation. Beacons 47 potentially can still be implemented because the deadline is the end of September 25. So the Ministry of Finance, together with the tax inspection, the customs inspections, are supposed to develop the operational plan for the implementation of the updated IT strategy. But 50 and 57, these are the beacons which have already been not performed because the deadline is coming at the end of August, which is already now. And here I'm talking about the independent verification of integrity and At the end of August, we were also supposed to review the selection for the appointment of the heads of supervisory boards of state-owned enterprises and to have the amendments in the bylaws of the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine. There is no information about anything going on in this direction. That's why 99% we will not perform this by that deadline. And there is also some information showing that corporate reform and transparent selection and appointment of members of supervisory boards will also be transferred to the new program with the IMF. And finally, I would like to also say that as far as this program is concerned, we have gone through 9 revisions, which is a record figure. But it should be mentioned that this partly happened due to the flexibility of the fund, which really tolerated a lot on our part. While the new program and the relationship between us and the IMF under the new program will probably be not that flexible, in particular because of this row with the liquidation of the independence of NABU and the specialized anti-corruption prosecution. Well, it ended up in a good, positive way, but anyway, in the new program, we may not only hope for the quick receipt of the first tranche, but we will have to confirm our status of a responsible state. Thank you. Thank you, Vyacheslav. You mentioned 99%, but this 1% is still left there because at least we have half of today and one more working day in August. Probably some decisions all of a sudden will be passed and this beacon will be implemented. But again, this is just 1% of the likelihood that this will happen. Unfortunately, we may see that even the beacons that were well known long beforehand, um, and we had a chance to work on them in a quite diligent way. The results, unfortunately, have not always been um, received. And let me ask Alexandra Butli, who is the leading expert of the Institute for Economic Research and Policy Consulting, regarding the initiative of the new composition of the government regarding the changes in the indicators, or rather the deadlines for the implementation of some indicators of the Ukraine facility plan. So, Alexandra, why do you think this initiative appear and will it be approved by the Council of the EU, which is a congregation of governments, and this is going to be therefore a political decision, and what may we expect further on in the process of implementation? Good afternoon to everyone. Well, really, we are talking about Ukraine plan, and let me remind you why this is important. It's important because the indicators of this plan give the grounds for Ukraine to be getting funding from the EU following Ukraine facility document. And before I answer the question, let me remind you that only on the 23rd of August, we received the money for the indicators performed over the first quarter, but we received only 3 billion instead of 4 billion 500 thousand because some of the indicators have not been performed. The composition of the High Anti-Corruption Court has been increased, and one more indicator about the plan has not been performed. And the government has not sent the report to the Green Commission, which means that we will again receive the funding later than it was supposed to be according to the budget plan. Yesterday, the government launched transparent international tenders on the product sharing agreements. The law on the vocational education has been approved. It's waiting for the president to sign. In the slides, it's mentioned that it's performed with a delay, but it has not yet been implemented. In fact, because the president has not yet signed this draft law, but we hope it will be signed. And then next week, the government will send the report about the performance of indicators for the second quarter, and it will also report on one of the indicators from the first quarter, which was implemented in the second quarter. And now let's go over to what Roman mentioned. On the 1st of August, the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine amended or rather updated the Ukraine plan, which is envisaged by the rules of Ukraine facility. But the discussions about the postponing of and changing of the indicators were launched, as far as I remember, in May by the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine. And as far as I understand, all those changes that have been approved by the government have been coordinated with the and agreed upon with the European Commission. So the procedure is now the same as for Ukraine facility. Everything that has been sent to the European Commission needs to be approved by the European Commission, the Council of the EU, and we hope that this will be done by the end of September. And we are not supposed to be waiting for any surprise to come because these updates seem to have been agreed upon by the European Commission. Well, the most substantial changes about the wording of the indicators, some interpretations, but what has been done is that three indicators, in particular the law on the state banks and national plan on waste management, are the indicators that have been already implemented, but we postponed them to the third quarter to get the money in this way. And the law on the integration pack for the integration package of electric power was transferred from the fourth quarter to the third quarter because the government considers that in the third quarter this law will already be approved. Two indicators which were very complicated for performance were divided, which is the creation of the new court for the consideration of administrative cases. It has been split into one which is approval of the law, and the second one, which is establishment of the specialized court. And the deadline for the first one is the third quarter, but the establishment of the new court will come in the fourth quarter of 2025. But again, this will be difficult to do because this is a complicated process, but the government thinks that they will manage, and we also hope so. The law on railway transport will also be split. We will have the law on the traffic safety coming in the fourth quarter, but the law about the market of the railway transportations will come next year. Well, this is rather good because the draft law has been submitted, but we cannot have it approved in this format. It needs some updates. It's important that both of the laws on the railway transport will envisage gradual coming into effect and not immediate coming into effect. And 11 indicators have been postponed from the third quarter to the fourth quarter of 2025 or even later. And many of those indicators were covered last time during the previous session. And these were the ones which we called difficult for implementation, or there were some exclamation marks. It's like the management of the civil service, then the law on the state assistance, and so on and so forth. And this is important because the government wants to just have a little bit more time to have those laws approved, because it's not realistic to have some of those draft laws approved in the second reading now when most of them are not yet in the parliament. But this here we're getting back to what we said last time, that we need to start working with the indicators at least half a year before the deadline. The draft laws need to be submitted to the parliament. There is the first reading, the second reading, and you cannot actually approve even two draft laws within 1 month. That's why you need to work ahead of time. You need to be proactive, and the MPs need to analyze the draft laws that they will need to have approved next year, and they need to start working with them already now. One of the indicators postponed for a year from the first quarter of this year to the first quarter of the next year is canceling of the moratorium for raising the tariffs for heat and hot water, which we're going to cover today. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Alexandra. Well, It's really true, as Alexandra has mentioned, that the second part of our session will be dedicated to a special topic, which is related to the changes in the regulation of tariffs and prices. I'm talking here about energy and utility prices and tariffs. And we will have Andriy Motovolovich, Member of Parliament of Ukraine, First Deputy of the Servant of the People faction. He has already joined us. We will also have the representative of the Ministry for Communities and Territories Development, Sviatoslav Minchuk, who is the head of the Department of Economics of Enterprises, Utility Enterprises, and he's directly responsible for the situation and financial health of those enterprises. And we will also have the director of the municipal enterprise Cherkasy Teplocommunenargo, Pavlo Karas. I don't yet see him, but let's hope that he will join us. So we will definitely start with the analytical component with the presentation of the information. And we have seen that unlike many other indicators, the postponement here comes not for 1 quarter or two, but for the year. And we know that the law on the canceling of the moratorium is not complicated from the technical point of view. So this means that here we are facing some political difficulties, which fact was by the fact mentioned by the representatives of the Ministry for Communities and Territories Development at one of our previous events, when we were discussing just the initiative of amending the law in the Parliament. And we will have Alona Korohot, the project expert of Dixie Group. She will do the introductory presentation. Thank you. You have 7 minutes. I'll try to be quick. And we're going to cover the special topic, and we will start was saying that now in Ukraine we have the moratorium for raising the prices for population. We have Law 2479, which is valid for the distribution of natural gas, heat energy, and heat energy and hot water services, in particular for households, for housing and utility services, and for homeowners associations. And for most of them, we have the so-called fixed plan, which means 7.96 hryvnias per cubic meter. It has been prolonged in the 30th of April 2026. The moratorium is not valid for enterprises, for companies. It has been partially cancelled. It was cancelled in June 2023 as far as heat and hot water is concerned, and in June 2024 it was cancelled as far as tariffs for the distribution of gas were concerned. And there is a resolution of the government recommending application of tariffs of the year 2022, also for for centralized water supply and water sewerage. Besides the moratorium, the Ukrainian energy market works in the PSO regime, which means that the state directly sets the prices for the key categories of consumers, and these are primarily households, dormitories, hotels. These are IDPs, religious organizations, and you can see that the price for them is 4.32 hryvnias per kilowatt hour, and in the nighttime it's 2.16, and the mechanism will be valid till the 31st of October 2025. And there is the so-called supply of last resort, which is Ukrenergo, and it will be getting 0.0 hryvnias per megawatt hour until the end of this year. And let me remind you that in June there came a significant increase of prices by 63%, which is a good example of how the state is trying to balance between the funding possibilities and the social services. As far as gas is concerned, so the PSO includes households, also DSOs, and the producers of electric energy from gas from the Ministry of Energy's list, and also the participants of the enterprise of the Naftahaz group. If we have a look at the tariffs, we can see a significant difference between regulated prices for residents and the real ones. For natural gas, we have 7.96 per cubic meter, while the market price is from 10 to 27 hryvnias. And if in the calculations of Dixie Group, it's even from 29 to 30 hryvnias, which means that what is covered is only 26%. In the energy sector, the tariff is similar. It's 4.32. The situation is similar, and the market price is from 8 to 11, and the level of coverage is up to 51. The heat supply is 1,460. The market price is 2,220, and the coverage is 66% according to Dixie Group's calculations, even 44. For water supply, the coverage level is 79, and this all shows us that the tariff policy is not based on the cost reflectivity principles, but on keeping the socially acceptable prices, which exerts pressure on the budget and the state-owned companies that need to somehow compensate for this difference. What is the situation with calculations? As far as residents are concerned, as of the 1st of July 2077, the level of debts for utility payments was 44.9 billion hryvnias, which is less than at the beginning of the year, but still a lot. The highest debts are in Kharkiv region, the city of Kyiv, Dnipropetrovsk region, and the key share of this debt is the one related to heat supply and hot water. This segment is the most problematic. If we speak about companies, Teplocommunenерgo and water companies, as of the beginning of July 2025, their general debt for gas and energy exceeded 126 billion hryvnias, and the lion's share of the debt, more than 111 billion, is the one for the gas consumed by producers of heat energy. The leader here is Kharkiv region, Dnipropetrovsk region, and Kyiv. If we speak about water companies, as of the 1st of June, their level of debt for electricity was 12 billion hryvnias, and the lion's share is focusing in Donetsk and Kharkiv regions. And the problem here is overspending of overconsumption of electricity. Like in water supply, there are 4 licensees: Chernihiv Vodokanal, Nikopol, Pavlograd Vodokanal, and Kharkiv Vodokanal. And in the field of water sewerage, there are 8 ones, the same: Chernihiv, Kharkiv, water companies, and others. In fact, Teplocommunenерgo heat supply companies are on the verge of survival. Their debts are rising. For natural gas to Naftogaz, to DSOs for gas distribution services, and they are not getting sufficient amounts from their consumers, and the moratorium does not enable them to work following economically substantiated prices. And as far as compensation of tariffs by the state is concerned, we can see that the overall amount of non-payments has exceeded 57 billion hryvnias. Mostly local budgets have to cope with this, but this means that communities need to spend a lot of money not on their development but on balancing this situation. And here is an illustrative case of Lozova and Kharkiv region. Starting with the 15th of August this year, their accounts of Teplovodoservice have been arrested because of the debts, and the town is facing the risk of not having a heating season and of not having the services of water supply, water sewerage, and waste disposal. Now we are talking about the IMF program Ukraine has undertaken to develop the roadmap in this respect, and we know that there is a memorandum of the economic policy which contains the commitment to, within 7 months after the end of the martial law, to develop this roadmap of gradual liberalization of the gas and electricity markets, which will include the PSO reform, increasing the tariffs, regulating the debts accumulated, and updating the system of utility subsidies for social protection. In Ukraine facility, there are 2 indicators under this task, which is the indicator called canceling the moratorium, for heat and hot water mentioned by Alexandra, and indicator 10.9, development of the roadmap for gradual liberalization of the market of gas and electricity. The deadline is the second quarter 2026. And also we should mention the government action plan, the CAMU's action plan, which is a draft, and this is the program of the new government, which includes updating the resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers number 502 and having a new procedure for developing tariffs for centralized water supply and water sewerage by November 2025. And now the issue is regulation of the accounts receivable and accounts credible of the enterprises dealing with heat, water supply, and water sewerage by October, and determining the mechanism of restructuring the debt that will not depend on the scope of debt. This will be the mechanism introduced by the end of this year. Let me speak about the risks and preventive factors. The issue of financial stability of companies is all about survival of those companies. We are talking about financial resilience and reconstruction of the destroyed networks and grids, and with no adequate tariffs, there will be no investment repairs, and that will be a risk for us in the winter period. Also, we're talking about critical infrastructural facilities. They do require heat, water, and electricity, which is important. And whether we do something in this respect is a sign to international partners showing that we are ready and capable of restoring our energy, and market prices will form the right incentives for the upgrading and refurbishment of the grids, and will also open up the possibility of choosing the supplier. The risks are about inflation and social effect, because there should be clear communication along the process of increasing tariffs. We need to introduce the targeted support for energy poor households and budget field. Then accumulation of the debts will lead to, as in the case of Lozova, to the lack of the heating period, and we need to take into account the war risks. New attacks and the energy infrastructure can change the balance as far as demand and supply are concerned at any point in time. That's why we need to develop scenarios for the frontline communities. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Alona, for going that deep into the problem we are now discussing. Well, it's really true that we are not just discussing one indicator or two indicators here or any specific structural beacon. We are talking about a wider range of issues which have not just appeared from scratch. The IMF program, the memorandum of the government economic and financial policy mentions them, and they're also mentioned in Ukraine plan, which means that at least we all do recognize that these problems exist, and we have some intention to overcome those problems. So starting our discussion, I will ask Andrei Motovolovets, what is the vision of this balance between political sensitivity of this topic and some commitments that Ukraine has undertaken? Um, what is the vision among the MPs, and can there be any balance? Because, you know, the government is being criticized regarding adoption of some specific laws that are required for the implementation of the programs. But what is your vision from the inside? Welcome, dear colleagues. Thank you for the present introductory presentations. You have mentioned that it is a serious problem. It is. And my answer would be as follows. I think that we will not settle this problem in this composition of the Verkhovna Rada, because the parliament will be working until the end of the martial law, and after that we will have new election, and we will ask for the appearance of the new political forces in the parliament. And in this context, we should have an open and straightforward discussion with the society, because I think that under the martial law, we will just need to sign a new social agreement, and we need to be getting ready for that already now. For many years, there was a great distortion in the tariffs. And the problem that we can now see if we take this program, well, those figures show that people are really poor and they need to spend money on the essentials, which is a real problem. They cannot pay high tariffs. And if we have a look at our budget in global terms, we can see that we have a lot of commitments, and I'm not sure that the budget will really survive in that context. And therefore, we need to be introducing some changes. I hope that the changes will come through digitalization. I also hope that since we have developed this unified social card, and as a result of that, we will really be able to see the people who are so much in need of assistance and subsidies. Um, I rent an apartment, and well, I have all the meters for heating, for hot water, and I actually don't understand why I should be paying less if I can pay more. And we should also take it into account that our gas meters and the system of monitoring them is not good. Once in 8 months, a lady comes and just manually records the figures on my meter. But I think that we should have this digitalized system, and then we will see who needs some subsidies. And the condition of the meter is not good. I think that many of our meters are outdated, and I'm not sure that they are showing the right figures. So we need to start working on that already now. And I do really hope that we will start preparing our residents for those changes. We don't just need to talk to our people. We need to replace their meters to show them how much they consume and what can be improved as the result of that. That we need to start some practical actions. Well, we already had some reforms in Naftahaz. We were having this transitional period during which people had a chance to install the right and adequate meters. And in that way, the parliament was trying to protect people. So this needs to be done in all the sectors, but we need a lot of preparation for that. Otherwise, the state budget will not cope with this distorted balance. And after the war, the risks will still be there. So we need to do something about that. We understand that this is not just a dream of the IMF or the task within the Ukraine facility. We understand that this is a real problem for us, both in the field of gas, electricity, water, and we need to change something to see how the prices will be changing, how we will be supporting the people who find it really difficult to pay all those tariffs. And um, our companies have some revenues and have some expenses, but there should be some balance. And we should be preparing our residents for that. I've been asking myself a number of times what I could do to improve the situation. But for example, there was an amendment made in the laws when some revenues coming within the payment of one of the taxes were to be spent on the energy sector. I, I know that we definitely need to develop a strategy, and we need to do fundraising. You remember the law of Ukraine on waste? Well, actually, in practice, nothing has changed because there is a problem of tariffs. It cannot be the case that we just adopt the law and it if it doesn't work in practical terms, we need to raise the tariffs because otherwise all the waste landfills are just closed. Nobody will work with that. So we need to be preparing for that. And I think that the politicians need to talk to their constituencies and to raise this issue. Unfortunately, I don't see any changes coming now. Yes, Andrei, so let me rephrase it. Are there any discussions regarding the conditions under which such decisions can be adopted? I mean, some preventive mechanisms, some safeguards for social dissatisfaction, or the ones that will prevent further uh, aggravation in terms of poverty of our vulnerable. Maybe, because I can even see the question in the chat, maybe we should improve the transparency of the tariff formation, or there should be additional money allocated to energy efficiency programs for consumers, or there should be better circulation ensured, or there should be some gradual transition, not just shock therapy. So are there any talks like this going on about the modalities? Because it's clear that the decision needs to be taken. We are fearful of approaching this decision, but we need this decision. But are there any discussions going on about the modality of the implementation of the adoption of this decision? Well, I think we should not speak on the state of the budget. There is no budget. The budget all goes to the Ministry of Defense, and that is clear. No additional budget funding will appear. As far as energy efficiency is concerned, there is a separate special account where money is accumulated from tax payments. Whether it's effective, well, it's not for me to assess, but we need to develop a plan and update our population regarding this plan, give the news to them. A lot depends on water companies, on gas companies. Water companies normally belong to cities, and probably they could be passing decisions at the local level. What about the changes? Well, I'm sure that the new parliament will form a new government, and the policy of that government will be different. But as for now, I think that Naftogaz is responsible for the situation because they have quite a burden, but they also have some revenues. Uh, but for example, I cannot comment upon how the supervisory board of Naftogaz was established. Well, at least for the moment, I don't see that we're fixing this problem. I would really be interested in seeing what the structure of our consumption is, who consumes how much, to see the overall picture. And on the basis of that data, we could take a decision. I don't see the solutions as for now, and I see that the major problem, I think that the major problem is all about meters. And it's Naftogaz who should raise this issue. Colleagues, our energy is changing. We have already lost all our CHPs. We also have lost some of hydropower plants. And therefore, we need to invest money into SAS, into solar power plants. But this requires money. If you want to build a strong and powerful system using all types of energy, we need to invest into this. And with such tariffs, it's not possible. We cannot be talking about any businesses in that field as for now because of the tariffs, because business is all about taxes, salaries, and if we are raising the prime cost, this definitely has an impact on the production. This is not pure economy. This is something different. We are now at the stage of survival, realization of the problem and survival. And I at least don't see that in the budget for the next year there will appear some money for changing this distortion. I thought that actually all the companies have independent supervisory boards. So we need to now engage the state and if there is a problem in one of the sectors of the energy, everybody will be affected by that. You can see what is happening to the gas transportation system, to the gas distribution system, and the easiest solution is to raise the CRM, but I don't think that it's a good way out because it's not only about production, it's also about processing. So we need to invest money into those complexes. We realize where the problem is, but I'm not sure that we can really apply all our political will to settle this problem. We are not going to settle this problem now. We just need to be getting ready for the end of the war because that is another battle that will be taking place. The country is so much disbalanced in terms of energy, in terms of tariffs, that it's not going to be accepted to the EU, no matter how heroic we are in ending this war. And the society should be getting ready for that. And we need to talk to our population for them to understand this. Whether we are good at this, well, I think no. And thank you for raising this topic and giving this opportunity to speak on this topic. I can see what is happening. Um, like we have installed some new requirements, let's say, for farmers, which make it unprofitable for them to work. So these are the things that cannot be done, though this is a different sector. We need to understand that a strong country will be the country the EU would like to have as its member. But at the moment, we don't have a strong country. We have this distortion, and this has been covered by your presentation. And actually, you could even make the estimates to see how aggravated the problems will become if nothing is changed at the moment. We should not speak about this problem only as about our decision. This is something that is supported, should be supported by the IMF and the EU, but this is not a task imposed on us. That is the task that we have because that's our problem. And that's what we should explain to our society. It cannot last like this. Well, and every time we mention this, that these are our tasks, that this is not a task imposed from the inside by some bad people from Washington and Brussels. No, this is something we have taken as a commitment. That is our task. But we're not reaching their objectives, and we need to be clear about where the problem lies. So thank you, Andrei, for your honest answer. Thank you for honestly telling us that there is no political readiness for solving this issue at the moment, but there is the realization of the problem and there is readiness to speak and to develop the plan. Wider share of preparation is the responsibility of the government, in particular the Ministry for Communities and Territories Development, that is in charge of the utility sector and the heat supply sector. You've mentioned independent bodies, and I should say that 2 years ago, as far as water companies are concerned, the regulator canceled the decision. After that decision and the revision of tariffs for water supply and water sewerage was criticized by the president and the prime minister, and then it was cancelled by the NERC. That's why our bodies are independent, but they don't work in vacuum, and they need to pay attention. Yes, but the prime minister has already been fired, not for this, I guess, but still, I remember that decision. But such decisions need to be locked in war times because it cannot happen overnight. People need to be prepared for that. In frontline territories, people are really so much poorer. Their situation is awful. Yesterday I had talk with Brigade 42, and they said that people are staying at the shop and just begging for food. People have become really so much poor. That is another problem. And mm, I think that tariffs are somewhere behind food because food and security come as a priority. So we need to focus on food security and then we can go over to tariffs. Unfortunately, that is really so. And where do you have this metrology in the government, in the Ministry of Economy? And in the Ministry for Communities, the Ministry of Communities is supervising the water companies. And what about energy? So well, it seems that we have this energy system as a consistent one, but here we have a child without an eye. Okay, so the child without parents, yeah. So let me give the floor to one of the parents of this child. We have Sviatoslav Khomychuk from the Ministry of Communities and Territories Development of Ukraine. So Sviatoslav, the task is not that simple for you. What would be your assessment of this dialogue with MPs, and what are the plans generally? We can see some intentions in the draft of the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine to fix the issue with water companies, partially also with accounts credible and accounts receivable of heat supply companies. But what about this difference in tariffs? What is your vision of this smooth transition to the economically substantiated tariffs? Well, good afternoon, dear colleagues. Well, first of all, thank you for your presentation. It was a very in-depth presentation with highly reliable information. And Roman, you have mentioned that a simple solution just to is to cancel the tariffs, to add some words in the law, but it requires so much effort, including political will. I don't even know how this is going to be done. So the moratorium is still valid. Heat supply companies are in a really difficult situation. On the one hand, they don't get enough revenues because of the low tariffs. On the other hand, they have this moratorium. They have to follow the old tariffs, and the state under the law 2479 actually is supposed to pay some reimbursement. So there are commissions formed that they check all the information. Then we try to aggregate this information, and according to the information received, we developed proposals for different bodies. We prepare also some amendments to draft laws, but at the same time, it's still questionable what do we do with the debts of companies, because it so happens that the state is supposed to pay this difference to companies, but the companies are supposed to pay this money to the National Commission. So how do we do the restructuring? There was law 1173 with the clear rules for the restructuring, and when this restructuring was taking place, there were no fines, no punitive measures. There was just a comprehensive set of measures. But the government changed, and the ministry immediately asked the government to repeatedly take this law under probably already a different number to launch this mechanism, because it so happens that unfortunately now it's not possible to liquidate the debt to Naftahaz trading, because these rules were valid by well until 2021. So really, this problem of that and the difference in tariffs is there. That's all about the budgets because the budget is mainly allocated to the defense sector. The Ministry of Finance also is in favor of such an approach. But everything that could be spent on our sector has already been allocated. We work with NAC Naftogaz, with the National Joint Stock Company Naftogaz, and whether it's about dividends or about advance payments, they are our partner, which is interested in having a new approach. So we are having this discussion, which the committee headed by Mr. Harris, the MPs in general. We hold regular sessions regarding the possible differences in tariffs. We are all included in that because we engage in that because we understand that we need to do something about it. There is some hope that for companies staying in frontline areas, at least something will be provided. So we are actively working on that. This is my update. Okay, thank you, Svetoslav. There has been an illustration of the case of Lozova. I can see that the representatives of the utility enterprise Verhelteplu raising the issue of Naftogaz filing a case in court when after that the accounts of the company are blocked. So your draft law that you have mentioned and your discussions with Naftogaz, will all the things help to fix the problem, or there is a need for something additional? Well, the situation is as follows. Naftogaz, there has this, well, there is a notion of the so-called limitation of action. We we keep in contact with them, and sometimes they do not file those cases in time. But if the draft law is approved, then we will have to restructure the debt that goes beyond the framework of the allocated. Yes, please decipher it. This is the difference in tariffs. Yes, so everything restructured, the debt is restructured beyond the difference in tariffs. So to say, the state has to pay 1 million, and the company needs to pay 1 million to Naftogaz. So if the state gives the money, the company gives the money to Naftogaz. But all the other debts going beyond this difference in tariffs need to be restructured. That is what will happen according to this new law. And mainly, it is indicated in the law that as far as Naftogaz trading is concerned, there will be no arrest of accounts because there will be a ban on arrest of accounts if the restructuring of the debt takes place. So this is similar to the law 1730 that we now have. Thank you. And actually, we wanted to also, you remember, we promised to work on the dividends from Naftogaz. Don't you remember this? Did we do it? Andrei, I think that this is the question to the government. No, that's actually a question for you if you happen to know the answer. Um, well, as far as I understand, the government was also supposed to introduce the draft law on the canceling of the moratorium. Yes, but submitting the draft law is one thing. We just need to work on that in practice because that is a comprehensive program. We need to work with the dividends. As far as I understand, there is no answer. Well, I can readdress the question to Sviatoslav. Well, if we take the difference in tariffs, the subventions, so these are clearing operations, which mean just mutual enrollments between the state, the company. So these are clearing operations going through the treasury. But anyway, the state budget should allocate the money for that. And for the money, be it based on the dividends or from advance payments, for the money to be there, the Ministry of Finance needs to um, provide to allocate this money. But the Ministry of Finance thinks that they should be so-called budget neutral, and everything is already in the budget. If we place some money in some item, then it means that we need to remove it from some other item of the budget. That's why actually I cannot say that it is really working now. Yes, but if Naftahas has some dividends, then they could be used, But Mr. Harris just amended actually the budget, as far as I understand, and there was something about working with the dividends from the sources of Naftahas. I don't know. Maybe you do know the answer. You would like to give any comment as a participant of this discussion? Well, that is a issue that requires a comprehensive solution. And as Andrei has mentioned, we just need to um, get seated at the table together and to discuss it with Naftahas, with companies, because each of them need to say what their problems are. And well, we mostly know about the challenges and problems, but we need to see the situation through the eyes of all the stakeholders. Yes, I can see some comments and some questions in the chat. They are related to the fact that money is being taken from the budget of the communities. And the question is, what is the legal and economic ground for this movement, for this flow of money? Uh, if in the EU everything is happening just in the reverse direction. And here is another question or another comment saying that the money from the communities was taken away, but 4% of the income tax were added to the community budget. And we understand that this money is used for refurbishment of some grids because there is a wear and tear, there is the depreciation, you need to pay salaries to people at critical infrastructure facilities. There is a need to buy reagents, spare parts, details. Yeah, I might try to actually comment upon this. Well, the point is that it has been mentioned that there should be a unified cabinet, online cabinet for the consumers of resources. I actually hear about this register for the first time, and the people in the chat are asking whether the legal grounds for taking the money from the municipal budgets, while in the EU the money flow is in the reverse direction. Well, we should take into account what is happening in the EU. Well, you could probably comment upon our latest decision about removal of 8 billion from the budget of the city of Kyiv. Well, can you really comment upon it? I'm not sure. So the money has been taken away from the community that did not use this money. And, there are a lot of companies re-registered in the city of Kyiv, but they are not using the money of the local communities. That's why this money has been removed from the community of the city of Kyiv. It's not the Kyivites' money. We have a good Minister of Finance who knows where the problem lies, and he's passing the decisions where to take money, where to remove money, and what to give, where to give more money. So that is the legal and economic ground. From the economic point of view, the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine decided that the money needs to be taken from that community because we are trying to balance the situation. Do you imagine what would happen if the Ukrainian railways stopped working, stopped functioning while it's actually taking military equipment to the front line? So we need to redirect the money sometimes, and we are taking it away from the community that is not using the money. I can also see some other questions in the chat. Read it. Let me read it to myself. It's about uh, the fact that the cities are financing water companies for decades. Well, that is true, and we need to communicate this and to discuss this issue with the society. Water companies and heat supply companies. Yes, because that was used to be our methodology, but actually, some changes could be introduced were it not for the moratorium. So you see, it's a kind of a vicious circle. There should be a comprehensive solution coming. I can see Alexandra Betli has raised her hand. You're welcome. Well, thank you. Alona mentioned that everybody knows the figures. I would say that nobody knows the figures. So, Alona, thank you for showing those figures in your presentation. Everybody just knows where the problem is, but when you mention the figure like 120 billion, people stay more focused on that. If you have a look at the figures of spending of money from local communities for the replenishment of the authorized capital stock of their companies, we would be surprised because quite a lot of money from the local budget is allocated to that. And actually, this is the money that could be spent on water sector, heat sector. Uh, I think that we need to have even a more detailed matrix, and we just need to get seated at the round table and have a discussion. Because if all our water companies stop functioning because they don't have the tariff in which would be sufficient to ensure the repairs, and not just the repairs, but to ensure some refurbishment, because used to be in a poor condition and now they're even in the worst condition. And then if we assess how much money we will then need for the repairs, I think that this amount will be much larger, much higher than what we would need to invest into those companies now. And Andrei has mentioned that people are getting poorer, but there is such an instrument as subsidies, and we need to explain it to people that it will be cheaper and easier for the state to be paying subsidies. That's what we did in 2014 and 2015 when there was a significant rise in the tariffs. But at the same time, the opportunities for getting subsidies was expanded, and it helped us lower the level of energy poverty. But I agree that we need to have a clear and transparent communication. We have this unified marathon, which is a TV program. I do not support it, but if we have this program, this channel, let's try and explain there that what we are going to do. With the prolongation of the moratorium, we need to explain to people that tariffs cannot be set low. You have a year of time to get ready for that. You will have some subsidies, you will also have some other opportunities, but we need to start talking about that with our population already now. This is the dialogue we really need in order to go out of this vicious circle that has just been mentioned. Thank you, Alexandra. We have been joined by Pavlo Karas. He's the director of Cherkasy Teplokомуненерго, a heat supply company. So, Pavlo, we have discussed a number of things here, but we are also interested in having a view of a person who is down to earth, who is practically working with this field and who is facing those problems on a daily basis. What should be, as you think, the sequence of decisions or solutions that will lead to the balancing of our tariffs towards the economically substantiated situation? Well, I would say that the problem is not about tariffs. Suppose for Cherkasy and for the refurbished Cherkasy Teplokомуненерго, there will be no problems. But in case the PSO is cancelled and in case we have liberalization, the tariff will not anyway rise by more than 40%. And taking into account the fact that subsidies have already disappeared as a phenomena, this tariff growth will not be the one that will impact and affect anything in Cherkasy at least. But the grid losses rate is 10% in Cherkasy. There are some cities where the rate is 50%. So what is Kryvyi Rih going to do? The tariff there is going to be twice higher than in Cherkasy, and at the same time, the services will not be provided. We need to take into account that we have different cities, Vinnytsia, Zhytomyr, Cherkasy, Kamenets-Podilsky, and there are some towns and cities that have been doing nothing over time, and there have been some which have been upgrading their systems in heat supply for many years. Well, there are some cities where mayors prefer arranging some amenities, and this mayor will be voted for again, but the people there don't have heat supply companies and water companies. So we need to work on this difference, on the system of difference in tariffs. We need to eradicate this difference between cities because we have just Naftogaz of Ukraine, and um, whatever if somebody does wrong on site has to be somehow reimbursed by Naftogaz. And even if our local companies are so much ineffective, if they have to address those supplies of last resort, well, all those problems have to be finally settled by Naftogaz. That's why we need gas liberalization. We need to liquidate PSO. We need to also liquidate this difference in tariffs. We should have tariff liberalization. And the only way for social equalizing is residential housing subsidy. That is nothing new. We cannot invent anything new. The tariff regulation by itself is so much difficult and we can make it simpler, but it's not a problem. The main problem is not tariff regulation, dear colleagues. The main problem is the evil, which is called the difference in tariffs. That is something we have fully got accustomed to, but that is the situation when the state budget has to reimburse for any inefficiency at the level of companies or by payers. So if we have the system further on, we will have poor quality of services, ineffectiveness, and we will have the destruction of the field. We shouldn't have this difference in tariffs. That's all from me. Thank you. Thank you, Pavlo. It's a very open and straightforward view, in particular from the point of view of the fact that your company is one of the most effective heat supply companies. So really, what do less effective companies do? They have to do upgrading. There is no other way out because unfortunately, we have a town in Cherkasy region which has the PTM 100 boiler, and it uses this boiler, which is, well, the capacity is 100 megawatts. Their elements used for the boiler is 12 megawatts, and the payers have to pay a very high tariff, but they need to realize that this is an ineffective approach, and they should elect their mayor on the basis of what he has done there with the critical infrastructure. They are electing a mayor because he has arranged some amenities and some yards in the streets. But first of all, the priority should be heat supply and water companies. And ours, well, my city mayor tells me, Paula, why have we done this refurbishment and upgrading? It should have been better to arrange amenities and parks. Well, so your suggestion is decentralization of the responsibility. It has been substantially decentralized, but the political will should be there to ensure this decentralization. I would generally do it differently. I am in favor of tariff liberalization. There should be some rules of tariff setting, and that should be as they have it in Europe. There are some rules regarding what is included into the tariff, and tariffs are no longer to be approved. Nobody approves any tariffs in Sweden, Denmark. They don't have any the procedure for that. Approval of the tariff is actually a system, a mechanism working only in the former socialist camp. And any system of approval presupposes some corruption components. That is the mixture of corruption and administrative pressure. And that's it. And some political factors are engaged in that. So I think that the national regulator should not be approving tariffs. It should be approving the procedure, the rules, and exercise control. But approval of the tariff should be the task of the head of the municipal company. That's it. Thank you. So you're ready to have this open gas market? Yes, I'm ready for working in the open gas market since I'm working in the open electricity market. Moreover, I can tell you that today, as of today, I will have better opportunities because I will buy gas when it is cheaper. I will put it into the storage facility, and I will move over to the solid fuel capacities. I'm ready for that. And I will have better conditions. I'm not moving to a solid fuel because it's not effective. All those who have switched to solid fuel it have not got any revenues, but they have got a lot of losses. There is nothing cheaper as for now than gas. That's all. That's it. So I'm ready for the open market. Okay, clear. Thank you. Maybe there will be some feedback from our colleagues, from Sviatoslav, from Andriy, regarding such suggestions. Well, I fully agree. I can tell you what kind of development are we talking about? There are some towns really where a mayor arranges a park and he's elected at the next election. But of course, the critical infrastructure should be our priority. I understand why mayors are doing it that way because they want to win in the next election, but that's a problem all over Ukraine. This is not just a problem of society. This is our general problem that we will need to fix. And it's the problem regarding who invests money into what. A lot of work has been done by some heat companies in some cities, but this work is underassessed if the problem is not recognized, let's say, at the level of the local authorities. It's unfair when one city is investing a lot into critical infrastructure and gets the same result as the other towns and cities that have not invested into that. That's unfair. And we have some cities that are ready for an open market, but most of them are not. And the fact that gas is the cheapest fuel now, well, for heat supply, that's really true. Let me give you just one example. Let's say you remember the situation between Cherkasy and Kiev at the beginning of the war. There was no street lighting in the nighttime. Well, we have cogeneration, and I made an agreement that I will increase the cogeneration capacity by 400 kilowatts, and this is exactly the amount we need for street lighting. And there was a situation, then there was a direct command to just switch off all the street lighting. But I have cogeneration, I just increased the capacity of cogeneration for the city to have lighting. But Kyiv could not provide for the street lighting at that time. So how could it be possible that Cherkasy will have lighting and Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, will not have it? But Cherkasy invested into cogeneration while Kyiv invested into the glass bridge. It's a good glass bridge because it survived after a missile attack, but don't force us to switch off lighting because, well, this means that we just shouldn't be better than Kyiv. But the reason behind it is very clear. In Cherkasy, we have more concentration than in Kyiv, and Kyiv did not invest into that. But they have a glass bridge that cost 400 millions. It's not a good bridge. You have not been to Kyiv. It's a kind of fake glass. It's not good glass. I just know one thing. The Cherkasy was staying without lighting, not because it could not afford it, but because in Kiev there was not lighting and it was not possible for Cherkasy to have it. It's a very interesting case that illustrates the system of the priorities, both locally and the national level as well. Let me also give the floor to Sviatoslav for a quick remark. Well, Pablo really has one of the best uh, enterprises in Ukraine, and he is a perfect head of the company, no doubt. And even today and yesterday, there have been some events with the participation of of his company where they're sharing best practices. But a lot depends on the head of the company. A lot depends on the mayor. It's true. So there is this discrepancy throughout Ukraine. What I can tell in this context, the difference in tariffs will fall away when the moratorium stops being valid. When we cancel the moratorium, the problem will disappear. No, never. I disagree with that. The problem will still be there. We used to have this problem, and well, we have Naftahas, we have this system. It's not about moratorium. The evil is in detail. Evil is in PSO. While we have this PSO and while Naftahas is interested in having this tariff difference, there will be this evil covered. Even before the moratorium, we did have the tariff difference. I remember that over the recent 30 years of the independence of Ukraine, there has been this difference in tariffs because it's a good point for Naftahas. And that's the reason. If we have an open market, we wouldn't need Naftahas. Well, PSO is valid only for the martial law period. Yes, but we did have this tariff difference all the time. We didn't live with normal regimes. Naftahas was specifically established for that. When are we going to have the open market? Why do I need Naftahas then? I don't need it. I will buy it from the producer and I will put it into my storage facilities. Naftahas will have no role to play. Why do I need Naftahas if we have this open gas market? Just let me enter this gas market. I've been asking to let me enter that market, but they are not allowing me to do it. I would like to even buy gas from abroad in Europe. I would import it and have a backup, a reserve. I would buy it in the open auction from a Ukrainian producer and I would store it in my storage facility. I don't need Naftahas, but they are not allowing me to kind of evade Naftahas. So this is one of the ideas of the transitional period to allow people to independently buy gas. So we are about to wrap up, dear colleagues, and we are going over to a more emotional discussion, I would say. I would like to express my gratitude to all of you. I've drawn some conclusions and I've learned some lessons for myself on the basis of what you said. The first one was about the survival mode and lack of resources that the state currently has, which is objective reality. The other point is political unreadiness of the parliament, but recognition of the problem and readiness to at least start some communication. The third lesson learned is some readiness on the part of the government to be gradually fixing this problem step by step. The fourth one is the issue of responsibility. Out of what we have heard, we have understood that there is no just black and white. There are no heroes or anti-heroes in this context because the responsibility should be shared. It is shared by all the stakeholders, starting with the authorities, both local and national authorities, and ending up with market participants. Naftahas was mentioned. By the way, we invited colleagues from Naftahas, but they didn't have an opportunity to join us. And also, you mentioned not only Naftahas, but heat supply companies, water companies, and other market operators in the field of utility services and housing services. So that is a shared problem and a shared responsibility for finding a solution, which means that we need to find a common shared solution. And even if there is an approval coming from the European Commission, we have more than 1 year to reach that outcome. And we have another indicator saying about the roadmap of liberalization. So these two indicators are by no accident mentioned in one and the same document because they need to work together in order to settle the issue of utility tariffs and energy tariffs and prices. Definitely, these two indicators and the solutions within them should come as one consistent whole, and their corresponding roadmaps should be prepared. We will definitely get back to that because in February we had a special topic on the debts of heat supply companies. This time we have touched upon the issue of moratorium, but I think that we will definitely get back to those issues and we will be following what efforts are being taken at different levels, both in the parliament and in the government and at the local level and in communication with our partners because we really want to fix those issues. So let me express my gratitude to all the colleagues from the consortium, to our panelists, highly distinguished panelists, and to also our highly distinguished audience for staying by the end of the session, for accepting this webinar format with all its advantages and disadvantages. And we will definitely stay in touch with you. As it was mentioned at the beginning, all the material and the recording will be sent out to all of you. The English version of the materials will be prepared in about a week's time. We will also send it out to you. Thanks a lot to all of you, in particular to the IMF, for supporting our